Welcome back. My name's Jana. This is my podcast called Amicably Yours, Jana. This is where I talk about all things to do with amicably resolving conflict, particularly in separations and divorces. So you'll have seen that we've had Heidi Denning on our podcast. She's a divorce coach, and she gave us a whole bunch of insight into her role, how she can better support my clients as well when they're going through the separation or divorce process. And I actually did receive quite a few questions after that podcast about her role, and some people wanted a bit more clarification. So I thought that we would start today with responding to some of the questions I received. Okay, so keep in mind, these are all just about Heidi and Heidi's role in divorce coach, okay? So first question is, do I need to have a lawyer and a divorce coach? So that's a really good question because Heidi and I play completely different roles in the process, okay? If you're going through separation and there's quite a few legal issues that we need to resolve, you're going to likely need a lawyer, right? There are cases where people can get divorced without lawyers. They are able to do that if it's amicable and they're not arguing and they're comfortable with that, right? There's got to be a certain level of are you comfortable with proceeding and making sure that, you understand your interests, you understand what you're entitled to, and you understand what's in the best interest of your children. Okay, so that's possible. But the large majority of people do require lawyers to help facilitate the process, whether that's helping them negotiate and draft separation agreements and getting that signed and then actually filing the divorce documents with the courts. So that's where we come in as lawyers. We act for your interests, right? That is the goal of your lawyer, is to take your instructions and to act in your best interest and, taking into account your instructions. So Heidi comes into play with your emotional side, right? She's there to support you emotionally, and she's there to help facilitate the process. Heidi will speak to you about some legal issues, but she doesn't provide legal advice, but she can help you brainstorm, for example, parenting schedules, or she can help you, discuss whether you want to keep the house or not, right? And she does provide a safe space for you to have access to somebody to answer any urgent questions or provide you with pretty immediate support emotionally. So Heidi and I play two separate roles. You do not need to have a divorce coach in order to proceed with the legal process, but clients do find value in having her. So that's the first question. Ooh, more password. Okay, number 2, does Heidi replace a therapist? So Heidi touched on this a little bit. Heidi does not replace a therapist. She is not a qualified therapist. She does not have that background. You can still speak with a therapist to actually uncover, your things like your trauma or childhood trauma, or, really uncover where you're at, and that therapist will provide you with better coping mechanisms by doing, deep dives and working with you through that process. So Heidi's not a therapist. Again, she's there for emotional support, right? And it doesn't look like therapy. It looks more like a conversation, I'd say. Okay. So third question, why is emotional or practical support even necessary if the couple is resolving their issues amicably? I'm going to touch on this a little bit later in another episode and talk about what does it truly mean to be amicable. Amicable is an intention. There's an intention to be amicable. But just because you say, my intention is to be amicable, it doesn't take away the fact that you might have deeper feelings and emotional trauma, or, stemming from different types of abuse that you've experienced throughout the relationship, right? The amicable is our intention. It's our intention to proceed amicably, but it can still be necessary to help work through the emotional side of your separation and your divorce. Okay? So then the next question is, do both parties need a divorce coach, or is it okay for just one party to have one? This is a great question. I've seen it all, okay? I've seen it that both parties have one. I've seen that one party really feels that they need one and therefore, only one party has it. I've also seen it where Heidi will work with both parties, okay? She will help facilitate communication, and she'll help brainstorm ideas and solutions to problems as they arise, right? So, no, if one party has it, the other party doesn't need to. You could both have it. Nobody could have it. Totally up to you guys. Okay, so then next question is, how do I, so Jana, and Heidi coordinate our work to support clients? So I think that this question stems from clients' concern that there's duplication of work. And I think it's really important to note that Heidi and I, when we do work together on files, we try to limit that duplication as much as possible. So if Heidi's already worked with you through a parenting plan that's suitable for you and your family, then she'll convey that to me. Or we'll hop on a video call with Heidi, you, and with me, and we'll all just discuss it briefly, convey that to me, and I can continue with the legal side of the issue. Heidi will, if you go to Heidi and have an issue, right, and you say, I really need this addressed, and maybe you're busy or maybe you're emotional, Heidi can relay that to me. Okay, so it's not like you say it to Heidi and then you also have to say it to me. Heidi and I work as a team. Okay. Does Heidi's involvement increase or decrease legal fees? So this is a really great question because it just depends on how much you want to utilize Heidi, right? If you and Heidi work through problems, I like the parenting example. If you work through a parenting plan with Heidi, you don't need to do that with me. And I mean, the reality is Heidi's rate is less than mine. So that's great, right? We could save some money there and Heidi can relay that to me. Now, there are times when, files do blow up and it's hard to predict, but we do try and keep our files as amicable as possible and as productive as possible. Is someone like Heidi allowed in mediation sessions? So the quick answer would be yes, they are, but there is a caveat. Mediation is a confidential without prejudice process, which means that third parties are not automatically assumed to be involved, right? And if they are, we have to get the approval of the mediator and the approval of the other, like opposing counsel, for example, or the other party. Now, sometimes if we're caucusing, meaning that the parties aren't in one room together, that makes it a lot easier for Heidi or a third party to be involved. But I think the test is that third party really has to be there to provide emotional support and not just to duplicate legal work, for example. So that third party really has to have a purpose, and that purpose is to provide emotional support for you during that mediation. And I do believe that a lot of mediators do see the value in that. Last question, does Heidi communicate with lawyers? No, Heidi does not communicate with the other side's lawyer, right? She'll communicate with me if we're on the same team, but Heidi does not reach out to the other side. She will not communicate with the other party or to their lawyer. She's not a lawyer. She does not legally represent you. That would just go through me. Okay, well, thank you so much for these awesome questions. I hope that was helpful. I am going to do the same thing with our guest, Zach. So we had Zach on one of our previous episodes, and you'll recall that he's the mortgage broker who spoke about, what he can do and his role in helping couples refinance after separation. So I did receive some questions from listeners about Zach's role, and there was some clarifying that needed to be done. So I'm going to quickly work through some of the questions I received. The first question is, do both spouses need to agree on the home's value before refinancing? So that's a really intricate question, right? Because if both parties, hypothetically, right, let's say Daniel and Miranda, they're both on title of that family home, okay? And say Miranda's going to buy Daniel out. Miranda will need to qualify to take over the mortgage, and she probably has to pay Daniel out half or his portion of the equity, right? And so that number is really going to determine what Miranda will need to requalify for, because she's going to not only have to assume the remaining mortgage, she's also going to have to get some form of top up to pay Daniel out as equity. Or maybe Miranda has wealthy parents or another way of obtaining the fund. So maybe she doesn't need to get the top up, but the value of the house doesn't have a massive impact on her requalifying, but it will have an impact on how much money she has to pay Daniel out. Right? Because when we determine the equity, we look at the value minus the liabilities on the property, and it's that delta. When we determine the value of the family home, there's different ways to do it. The parties can agree on the value and say, yeah, we agree that the house is worth $700,000, or we can get appraisers involved, where, you know, Miranda could go get an appraiser. Maybe Daniel likes the number, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he has to go get his own, and then we compare, or we meet in the middle, right? Sometimes parties get a joint appraiser, and so they both pay half, for example, of the cost for the appraiser, meaning they both have equal interest in that number, and the appraiser can talk to both parties, and that's often an amicable way to get that value determined. Okay, good. Then the next question is, can one partner refinance without the other's consent during separation? So if you own a property jointly, no. Right? You're jointly on the mortgage, you're jointly on title. One party cannot just go and kick the other party off the mortgage and the title. And we actually have specific laws in Alberta that deal with that exact situation. And that's called our Dower Act. Okay, the Dower Act makes sure that the other spouse is made aware and has to give their approval for any sale or remortgage or title transfer or change in that situation. So both parties are actually protected in that situation if they're married. Okay, dower applies to married couples, so that's a good precaution that the government put in to make sure that one party can't just kick the other party off of title without their knowledge. Does spousal support or child support count as income for mortgage qualifications? It definitely can. And I think that the different lending institutions have different rules around how much weight they put on that. But for sure, right? Because it's considered income. It's considered income to the receiving partner. And so that is an important consideration to determine how much money they're bringing in every single month to be able to pay off a mortgage. And we need to know that to see how much they can qualify for. So that's a great question. This one goes kind of with the above one, do spousal or child support payments make it harder to qualify for a mortgage? That can also be the case, right? Because if you're the payor and now you're paying spousal support and child support to your ex, that's less money that you have every month to put towards a mortgage, and the banks will consider that. And that's why the banks often want to see separation agreements so that they can determine how exactly is the parties' incomes flowing after separation and how is support being paid. So they will want to know. Then we have a question. If someone hasn't finalized their separation agreement yet, how do lenders treat their application? So this is also very interesting. If a bank doesn't know that you're separating, they will likely still treat you as married, meaning they'll consider both of you when requalifying. Now, the proper way likely would be to advise them that you're separating, send them the separation agreement when it's ready. But I think that if you were to requalify or figure things out without a separation agreement, the bank, or an order, the bank would consider that you're still married. How can someone qualify for a mortgage with only one income after separation? It's tough, right? Because now all of a sudden we go from a two-income household where both of your incomes were used to essentially determine what you qualify for, and now we take that one income out, and maybe your lending power drops a bit. right? It's difficult, right? Life might not look exactly the same as it did after, or as it did before separation. Okay, so it's difficult. Is it risky to co-sign for your ex? Yes. Okay, if we're dividing property, my approach is always to make sure that we fully divide property, that you guys don't commingle again after we've done all this work to divide your property to do a payout, right? So if your ex needs a co-signer to get another mortgage, it's best that they ask somebody else. Otherwise, you're going to be on the hook for that liability, that mortgage, when you're already trying to probably get your own over here. I think it's cleaner. Divide your property, separate your finances. Here's your money, and you guys can both go get a new mortgage or rent or invest your money however you both see fit. But I don't think that you should be co-signing with your ex. It complicates the work we've just done to kind of untangle your finances. How do you get a spouse removed from the mortgage and then from title? Okay, so this is a really great question, and this is a practical question. We need to get the separation agreement done, okay, so that the bank knows the terms of the separation. For example, who's getting support and who's not. Then we have to go to the bank and we reach out to somebody like Zach, right? And Zach can negotiate a new mortgage for us. That new mortgage is then in your name only. And if you're taking over the house, then you would have to pay out the other party, whatever that looks like. Okay? Once we have that new mortgage in place, we can go to land titles and we can say, hey, land titles, look, we've remortgaged. It's just in our name. We'd like to register this new mortgage on the title and remove the other party from the title. So there is a process there. And like Zach mentioned, it's best to get him involved as soon as we know we're separating so he can come up with options and help us determine what we're able to qualify for, how quickly, and get that process going. All right, next question. What if neither spouse can afford to stay in the home? It's right, like I just mentioned, it's hard to qualify with one income when you've been used to qualifying with two. And if neither party can afford to buy the other party out of the equity in the home, or to even continue making mortgage payments on a refinance mortgage, then there's really no choice but to sell. That means either selling completely and putting it on the market, or perhaps you can find another co-signer like your parents who might want to buy into the property with you. Okay? Next question. How can working with someone like Zach help reduce legal fees or speed up negotiations? I think it's really important to get Zach involved as soon as possible because he'll give us our options. Once we know our options, we know right away whether you can keep the house. Can you afford it? Do they want the house? Are we selling the house? What are our options? Once we know what's happening with the property and once we've done our disclosure, then we can really work together to put a plan in place, like an offer, even a separation agreement. We can get that done quite quickly. And so I think that having Zach involved and having him work through the options with you and realizing what you can qualify for right from the start helps reduce legal fees because we have a straight game plan. We know where we're heading. We know what we want. Let's get there. Okay, so this question is not directly related to Zach, but it's very interesting because it's about housing. It's, can separating partners nest? Nesting is the term we use when the family home is used as the home base. So, we've raised our family in this house, we lived in this house, we both have an attachment to this house, and the kids are particularly used to or comfortable in this home. So sometimes what parties choose to do is they choose to have the children remain in the house and the parents actually go in and out. So if it's your parenting time, you'll come into the house for, let's say, 3 days and your ex will come out. You likely will rent an apartment where you both go on your off days, okay? And then when your 3 days are done, you go to the apartment and your ex comes into the house. And that way the children stay in a really stable environment. And that's the one thing that the parties really value when they choose to nest. Nesting doesn't necessarily solve our property division issue, right? Because somebody still has to buy the other one out. It's more of an interim solution. It's more of a band-aid. It's to say, let's do this for the next year or so, or maybe less. But ultimately, we do need to divide your property, and we need to determine who's going to keep the house, or are we selling it? What's happening? But nesting is a great option when the parents are amicable. They don't mind being in each other's space, right? And they're comfortable with the idea of still living in each other's spaces, whether it's the rental apartment or the family home. So those are the questions I had from my podcast with Zach. I hope that was helpful.